We're starting a new unit today in the Civil War called The Turning Point. Today's lesson is called Leadership of Two Presidents. Our objective is to compare and contrast the lives of Abraham Lincoln and Jefferson Davis. You're going to need a lot of room in your notes today. You may want to go to a new page unless you have a lot of room on the page that you're on. It says we're going to compare and contrast, so I'm going to make a Venn diagram. Look at the comic. I am the president. No, I am the president. I don't think so. I know so. Not whatever, pretender. Knowing what to do and doing it are sometimes two entirely different things. It is an easy thing to say, I can't believe she did that. If it had been me, I would have done such and such. Or maybe a friend gets himself in trouble and you respond, dude, what in the world was he thinking? There's no way I would have done that. The fact of the matter is no one knows how they will react in a given situation until they are thrust into it. Life is a journey, and every step you take prepares you for the next. Decisions made today play a part in decisions you will make tomorrow. For this reason, it is important to carefully consider the choices you make now. In today's lesson, you'll learn about an era where there were two presidents serving at the same time. Abraham Lincoln and Jefferson Davis both served with distinction. Both were willing to risk everything for what they believed in. Neither imagined ever being president, but choices they made on their life journey brought them together for a brief moment in time. I didn't draw this very well. Okay. So one of them is Jefferson Davis. And the other one is Lincoln. Okay, the early years. Jefferson Davis was born on June 3, 1808, near Fairview, Kentucky, barely 120 miles where Lincoln would be born 8 months later. The youngest of 10 children, David spent much of his life in Mississippi. He graduated from Transylvania University in Kentucky at the age of 16 and attended the military academy at West Point, graduating in 1828. He served in the military until 1835. Okay, now I'm going to scroll down to Jefferson, where it says early years, and let's read Jefferson. Lincoln. Abraham Lincoln was born near Hodgenville, Kentucky on February 12, 1809. Okay, so it says Lincoln was born in Hodgenville, Kentucky. Okay, he was born in Hodgenville, Kentucky, 1809. On February 12th. Okay, now where did it say that Jefferson Davis was born? He was born in Fairview, Kentucky, so they're both born in Kentucky. In 1808. Okay. The family eventually moved to Illinois, where Lincoln struck out on his own at the age of 22. Despite less than 2 years of formal education, he became an avid reader. Okay. So Abraham Lincoln didn't have much education. It says Davis graduated from Transylvania University. So he had a college degree. And it says that Abraham Lincoln had less than 2 years of formal education. So he had, I'm going to say, 2 years of an education. So Davis was very educated. Lincoln had very little of an education. The family eventually moved to Illinois, where Lincoln struck out on his own at age 22. Okay. So Lincoln spent most of his life in Illinois. Davis spent much of his life in Mississippi. Despite less than 2 years of formal education, he became an avid reader. He first ran for public office a year later and lost. In 1834, he won a seat on the state legislature in Illinois and became fascinated with law. He taught himself law and passed the state bar exam in 1837. Okay. Successes and failures. Thus, Lincoln began a very successful career as an attorney. He practiced law until elected president in 1860. Okay, so it says Lincoln was an attorney. Okay. It was during the time that Lincoln began to assert himself on the national stage. He spoke out against the Kansas-Nebraska Act of 1854, believing it did nothing more than further divide a nation. His first famous speech came during this time when he stated, "A house divided against itself cannot stand. I believe this government cannot endure permanently half slave and half free." A series of debates followed in 1858 against Stephen Douglas over the issue of slavery. These debates placed Lincoln in the spotlight as a member of the new Republican Party. Even though he did little campaigning and despite not being on the ballot in most southern states, Lincoln won the presidential election in 1860. Now let's go up to Davis and let's read his successes and failures. It was at this time Davis fell in love with the daughter of Zachary Taylor, a future U.S. president. Taylor disapproved of Sarah marrying Davis, who resigned his commission. The two lovebirds eloped to Kentucky. 3 months later, while visiting in New Orleans, they contracted malaria, and Sarah died. Following the death of his wife, Davis withdrew from public life for a period of about 8 years. It was during this time he developed his political beliefs. In 1844, he was elected to the House of Representatives for the state of Mississippi. This was to last only 2 years, however. The Mexican-American War broke out in 1846 and resigned his House seat to take up arms. He served in the war with distinction. Upon his return to Mississippi, Davis was appointed to fill a Senate vacancy. He ran for governor in 1851 and lost. He refused to be discouraged. Instead, he became heavily involved with the issue of states' rights and campaigned for Franklin Pierce, who was elected president in 1852. Pierce made him Secretary of War. When Pierce lost the 1856 election, Davis once again headed to the Senate. While maintaining the belief that federal government was too restrictive on states' rights, Davis did not believe that secession was the right thing to do. Yet when his home state of Mississippi seceded in January of 1861, he agreed to go with the majority and resigned his Senate seat. He was elected the first and only president of the Confederacy in November of 1861. Okay. So Lincoln and Davis both disagreed with secession. Disagreed with, see if I can spell it right, Secession. Okay. I forgot my C in education, didn't I? Education. So it said Lincoln was an attorney. And it said that Davis held a few seats in the Senate. Let's see, he served in the House of Representatives. He served in the House. We're just going to put House of R. He served in the House of Representatives. And he served as Secretary of War. Okay. Let's talk about Jefferson Davis as president. From his White House in Richmond, Virginia. Okay. We said Davis, well, we'll get there. That's okay. From his White House in Richmond, Virginia, Jefferson Davis made many of the military decisions along with Robert E. Lee. There was little he could do to win against a foe that had the resources to wage a long war. As hostilities continued into 1864, Davis took it upon himself to make more and more of the decisions. This resulted in some poor choices militarily as the South began to lose battles. As the Union Army descended on Richmond in the spring of 1865, Davis and the Confederate cabinet escaped and eventually found their way to Georgia. The cabinet was dissolved in May of 1865, and Davis was captured a few days later. He was held as a prisoner for nearly 2 years at Fort Monroe, Virginia, without trial until bail was posted by a number of Northern and Southern citizens. The next chapter in his life was about to be written. Okay, now let's scroll down and let's read about Lincoln being president. As president, Lincoln did not believe the Confederacy had a right to secede under the Constitution. After a number of states did so prior to his inauguration, Lincoln tried to bring them back by saying, "I have no purpose directly or indirectly to interfere with the institution of slavery in the states where it exists. I believe I have no lawful right to do so, and I have no inclination to do so." Even then, the Confederacy remained in place as the Civil War began. In the years that followed, Lincoln did what he felt was allowed by the Constitution. Because he looked upon the Southern secession as an act of rebellion, the Constitution allowed him to exert more power than normal. Okay, now Davis was president of the Confederacy. President of Confederacy. Confederacy. Okay, and it said that the White House was in Richmond, Virginia. So the White House was in Richmond. Virginia. Okay. Lincoln was president of the United States. And the White House was in Washington, D.C. Okay, perhaps the most controversial thing he did, going back to Abraham Lincoln, perhaps the most controversial thing that Abraham Lincoln did was suspend the writ of habeas corpus. Simply stated, this is a safeguard against unlawful imprisonment. It gives the accused the right to be heard. How did Lincoln do this without breaking the law? Section 9 of Article 1 of the Constitution states in part, "The privilege of the writ of habeas corpus shall not be suspended." unless when in cases of rebellion or invasion, the public safety may require it. In all, more than 18,000 Confederate sympathizers were arrested and imprisoned. Okay, so Abraham Lincoln, just a minute, he suspended the writ of habeas corpus. Suspended writ of habeas, okay, I think it's AS, yeah, habeas corpus. Alright. Although the Civil War originally centered on states' rights, the focus changed when Lincoln issued the Emancipation Proclamation. The central issue now became the abolishment of slavery. Okay, Lincoln wrote the Emancipation Proclamation, meaning he freed the slaves. Emancipation. Oops, why did I put a comma? Proclamation. As far as the war came to an end, Lincoln wanted to bring healing to the nation as quickly as possible. In part, he stated in his second inaugural address, "With malice towards none, with charity for all, with firmness in the right, as God gives us to see the right, let us strive on to finish the work we are in, to bind up the nation's wounds." However, he never got to see his goal come to pass. Okay, is there anything else about them being president that I want to write? Okay, it said Jefferson Davis was held prisoner in Fort Monroe, Virginia. So he was held prisoner. And it was probably because Lincoln suspended the writ of habeas corpus. Okay, let's talk about after the war. Look at Jefferson Davis after the war. 2 years after being released, Davis became the head of an insurance company. He was elected to the United States Senate again in 1875, but was denied his office. Section 3 of the 14th Amendment, which was passed in 1868, stated that anyone who had violated their oath to protect the Constitution by joining the Confederacy was not allowed to hold public office. Over the next few years, before he died in 1889, he wrote 2 books about the Confederacy. Interestingly enough, in 1978, Congress voted to remove the ban from Jefferson Davis, allowing him to become a citizen of the United States once again. Several southern states celebrated his birthday as a holiday. Okay. Now let's read about Abraham Lincoln after the war. 5 days after Confederate General Lee surrendered to Union General Grant, signaling an end to the war, Lincoln was assassinated by John Wilkes Booth and died the next day, April 15, 1865. The era of 2 presidents was at an end. Okay, so Lincoln was assassinated 5 days after the war ended. Okay, so he was assassinated by Booth. It says after the war, Davis wrote 2 books about the Confederacy. Okay, their place in history. It is somewhat strange how 2 people born in the backwoods of Kentucky, less than a year apart, would someday lead a divided nation. Both men were considered heroes by many despite their differences. Neither can be regarded as enemies of America, for both loved their country without question. One served in the military protecting against physical enemies, while the other guarded the Constitution with the law. Neither wanted secession, yet they remained on different sides. The Civil War did not originate out of decisions they made, but they were forced to deal with it. So let's review. Before completing the problem set, make sure you understand the main points of this lesson. Jefferson Davis and Abraham Lincoln were born about 100 miles apart in Kentucky. Lincoln's career involved law, while Davis was involved in the military. Davis believed in the institution of slavery, but did not believe it was right for states to secede from the Union. Lincoln treated the Confederacy as a rebellion, therefore he was able to make a number of controversial decisions in order to preserve the Union, including suspending the right of habeas corpus. After the war, Davis was elected to the Senate but was not allowed to serve due to a provision in the 14th Amendment. He wrote 2 books about the Confederacy. President Lincoln was assassinated by John Wilkes Booth 5 days after the war ended. Okay, let's look at our T-chart. Our Venn diagram. Okay, it says Davis was born in Fairview, Kentucky in 1808. Lincoln was born in Hodgenville, Kentucky, 1809. Davis went to Transylvania University. Lincoln only had 2 years of an education, if that. Davis spent most of his life in Mississippi. Lincoln spent most of his life in Illinois. Davis served on the House of Representatives, and he was the Secretary of War in the military. Lincoln was an attorney. Davis was the only president of the Confederacy. Lincoln was president of the whole United States. Davis's White House was in Richmond, Virginia. Our White House is in Washington, D.C. Davis was held prisoner after the war for 2 years because Lincoln suspended the writ of habeas corpus. Lincoln wrote the Emancipation Proclamation. Lincoln was assassinated by James Wilkes Booth. After the war, Davis wrote 2 books. What they have in common is they both disagreed with secession. Okay? Go ahead and study that lesson and answer the questions.